Today I'm going to run you through my top travel photography tips. Now, over the last 10 years I've travelled to over 40 countries around the world, including Myanmar, Nepal, Namibia and Argentina. And these next tips I'm going to run you through are what I deem to be the essential ingredients to getting effective shots on the road. My tips are geared to normal photographers who like to get the most from their holidays without compromising the experience. So let's get started. Tip number 1, pack light. This one is essential. There's no point bringing all your gear. You're going to have to be ruthless and evaluate what is essential. You're much better bringing highly versatile gear, like versatile lenses that can go from wide to super zoom all in one. I have the Nikon 28 to 300mm, for example, and that works perfectly on the road. If your agility and your comfort are compromised by your gear, you really have to question if it's worth it. Tip number 2, find the right balance. There is no point spending the whole holiday looking for a viewfinder. Sometimes you have to put the camera down and just experience the location that you're at. It's really not worth it. It's too easy to become obsessive to the point that it has a detrimental impact on your actual holiday experience. This is one that I've got wrong in the past. And it's always a difficult one to get right, but it's very, very important. Tip number 3 is take your power and storage seriously. You need to be taking multiple spare batteries and multiple memory cards. The last thing you want is being constrained by your power and your storage capacities when you're on the road. Really, you need to be charging your batteries at every available opportunity, because you don't know what your power availability is going to be like at your next destination and your next stop. If your camera has 2 memory card slots, then really you should be running back up to one of them in case you have a memory card failure on your primary slot. Bring portable hard drives, bring laptops and back up as much as you can, because you can never get those moments back if you lose them. It's really important. I've lost photos before and it's quite devastating. Tip number 4 is research. You really have to immerse yourself in your destination before you actually arrive. You need to ask yourself, what are the best compositions? How long does it take to get to a destination? What are the barriers to getting effective shots? What are the best times of going to this location? You need to know all these answers to these questions before arriving. If you fail to prepare, then prepare to fail. Tip number 5 is settings compromise. Now, in an ideal world, it'd be great to shoot off most of your shots on a tripod. But realistically, it's just not achievable on your average holiday. You're going to frustrate the life out of people that you're traveling with, and you're going to damage your experience by doing that. So really, you're going to have to get used to the fact that most of your shots are probably going to be handheld. So my recommendation is shoot higher ISOs, shoot snappier, shutter speeds to get those nice handheld shots. And also, shooting RAW is always better than JPEG, and I'd always recommend it. But there could be certain circumstances where it's just not practical when you're on the road. Shooting thousands and thousands of RAW files is going to take up huge amount of storage. So don't feel pressured and put off to shoot JPEG sometimes. There are circumstances where it's perfectly fine on the road. Tip number 6 is embrace your conditions. Quite often when you're traveling, you've got a very limited time frame in a specific location, and you don't have the luxury of sitting around and waiting for the perfect conditions. You simply have to make the best use of what you've got. The light isn't always going to be perfect, and I think when you understand that, then it becomes a lot easier to shoot actually. Sure, you can get up early to increase your chances of capturing that beautiful morning light, but that isn't always practical. Tip number 7 is learn to trust your instincts and don't overthink your shots. Now, when you're away, time is very precious. You may only have a few seconds in any given location to get that shot. You can't afford to get bogged down chasing perfection. It's not going to happen. You're going to frustrate yourself and you're going to frustrate those around you. Once you've come to the understanding that undoubtedly another photographer with way more time has probably already captured the same image better than you have, then it takes all that pressure off your shoulder. Just make the most of what you've got and move on. Tip number 8 is assess your surroundings. Now, I've seen lots of the tip videos that suggest putting tape on your camera body or your lens will deter thieves, but I don't think that'll actually achieve anything other than make you look like a donut. I think you just have to use common sense. It's about risk and return. There'll be certain circumstances where it's not worth the risk of bringing your camera out to get a certain shot or a certain series of shots. Only you can make that judgment, and you need to learn how to do that. I'd highly recommend actually investing in a good compact camera that you can slip into your pocket for those kind of circumstances. Tip 9 is a big one. Do not edit your photos while you're on your trip. I've seen so many photographers do this, and it frustrates the life out of me. They can be sitting in the most beautiful locations and yet their head is buried in Lightroom and Photoshop. Don't do it. Your time away is precious, every second of it. Leave the editing till you get home. If you're going to do any work like that when you're away, I would suggest applying ratings to your standout shots and deleting some of the inferior shots. This will make the editing process that little bit slicker when you get home, but do not get stuck into the post-processing. It's a mistake. Tip number 10 is get familiar with your gear. As I've said many times in this video already, time is precious when you're away. You don't have the luxury of learning your camera settings while you're in the moment. You need to know them instinctively. So really you need to spend time before you go away just recapping and refreshing all your camera settings, where the different buttons are, etc. You don't want to ruin the moment and ruin the photo by scratching your head over where to find a camera setting. Tip number 11 is think about perspective. When you travel, it will reveal landscapes of a scale you didn't think possible. And quite often when you try and shoot them wide, you'll actually turn out with quite poor results. I've learned that really perspective is key, and one of the easiest, simplest ways of doing this is getting people in your shot, other tourists. It adds such scale to the images. Initially it's something that I try to avoid, but I've learned actually to embrace it. Tip number 12 is take plenty of shots. You may only be in a location once in your lifetime, so really make the most of it. Shoot off as many shots as you can. This doesn't mean holding down the shutter button and shooting off 9 pictures a second. What I mean is make subtle changes to your composition and your positioning on a given image. Then, when you get home, decide on which image is best. This way, you'll increase your odds of success. Tip number 13 is avoid taking postcard shots. Now, postcard shots are famous for good reason. They're beautiful compositions, but what's the point of taking exactly the same shot that millions of other photographers have taken? You need to put your own stamp on it. You need to think, what can I do differently here? Has it been shot from this angle? Would this composition work? Make it your own. Tip number 14 is the importance of aperture priority mode. Now, manual mode is undoubtedly the best, giving you the highest degree of flexibility, but it's not always practical to use it when you're on a travel shoot. I tend to find personally for me that aperture priority mode is the mode to go for. Simply dial in the aperture that you need for the particular scene that you're shooting, and the camera will take care of the rest. This will allow you to shoot effectively for dynamic and fast changing lighting conditions that you are not familiar with. Tip number 15 is patience is king. Now, you may get to a particular location and you may find that the lighting conditions are momentarily quite poor, or you may get to a particular spot where the crowd is just too busy at that particular moment. But if you think that the shot is worth it and you're convinced that those conditions are going to change, then it's well worth waiting around. I've had lots of circumstances where I've got to a particular composition that works fantastically well, but at that particular moment it hasn't worked, and just waiting that extra minute, 2, maybe even 5 or 10 minutes has made all the difference. But only you can make the judgment of whether waiting around is justified. Tip number 16 is keep your sensor clean. Now, without looking at your images on a big screen, it can be really easy to miss that you've actually got a dust problem. So I would suggest taking precautionary measures. You need to pick and choose your environments for switching your lens over very, very carefully indeed. And I'd also recommend packing a little convenient travel blower to correct any dust problems that do arise. On one of the very first trips I made about 10 years ago, I got back from an 8-month journey, and virtually every single image from that trip had dust all over it. Do not make the same mistake. Tip number 17 is don't forget to get yourself in some of your shots. The most unique thing about your photography is you. So it actually is a big shame not to actually be in your own photos. It can be quite easy to get carried away behind the camera, but really you need to be getting in those photos. It's your holiday, it's your experiences. Be part of what you're shooting. Tip number 18 is mix up your shots. Your photography can get quite stale if you keep on taking the same type of image over and over. It doesn't matter how amazing the landscape is. You need to try and instill some sense of variation and diversity in the pictures that you're taking. So by all means take the wide shots, but also try and take those intimate, tight, focused compositions which actually help tell the wider story of the location that you're in. You'll find that your travel portfolio will benefit massively from doing this. Tip 19 is, for crying out loud, insure your gear. When you're traveling, you go to environments which push yourself and your camera beyond its normal comfort zone. This means that there's a higher degree of risk. So in my opinion, it's absolute madness not to have some degree of insurance on your camera equipment when you're traveling. And my final tip is actually a very important one. It's don't take it too seriously. A good holiday is not about the photos that you bring back. It's about the experiences and the memories that you bring back. All photography is a way to facilitate those memories and make sure that they don't fade over time. Don't let photography itself become the defining memory of a trip. Well, I hope you've enjoyed watching my video on my top travel photography related tips today. I hope these will prove very useful for you on your next journey. If you do have any tips of your own that you'd like to share with me, please leave them below in the comments. If you've enjoyed what you've watched, please subscribe to my channel. I'll hopefully have more travel related content for you soon. Until next time, goodbye.